Hey guys, this is Brett Young, Taylor Young, and Rod Erb, and you're tuned in to the Be Extraordinary podcast with Erb and Young. Real conversations about business, leadership, and personal development. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Be Extraordinary podcast. Good morning, everyone. We got a special episode for you today. We're excited. We've been waiting for this for almost a year, I think. Was it been a year? Maybe not that long. March.
Yeah.
March. I know we were trying to get together and we scheduled everything, and you're super, super busy, and same with us. And I got really sick a couple days before we were supposed to record. So I'm super grateful that you're here. For the listeners at home, a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are aspiring high achievers. Maybe they're entrepreneurs, maybe they're sales professionals. They could be in the operations of managing people. And everyone's looking for that edge. Everyone's looking for that extra step. Everybody's looking for the stories that maybe they can borrow from to take some things from other industries or maybe their industry and install it into their personal process, their system. And today you're going to hear from somebody who has achieved at a very, very high level. Ashley Bedford with Aptly Home Loans is here with us this morning. And we're going to get into some really tactical stuff about what is allowing you to do some things that are absolutely unbelievable in this market, in the market that everybody is rolling their eyes at with interest rates. And I think the numbers that really jumped off the page with me, almost $100 million in volume last year, if I have that correct.
Yes.
I think you corrected me with 94.
94.
But who's counting, right? So just an incredible amount of volume for what support and what you do, and just an obsession to detail, and an incredible, what will be an escalation of a career, but really kind of this incredible culmination of almost a 10-year journey at this point, right?
Yeah, 9 years this June, so.
9 years this June. It's so fun. And so, I guess selfishly, I would love to, first of all, I'd love to hear about your story and what led you to where you are today. I know we've been able to do some business together, which is super fun, and we're grateful for that. Shout out to Gian. For setting us up, which is really good. But selfishly, I would love to give a ton of value to the listener today about what does a day look like for you? Like, why is it that you're just seem to have this killer instinct and this mindset of abundance, and why you are where you are given the journey that you've had, which would be really fun. Yeah. So, but thank you for being here on the show, Ashley. And I've got Mr. Taylor Young with me today, which is awesome. So,
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned, we were talking offline, and Brett, great opener, where I really think sets the tone for you to get into. But you're talking about next deal up, right? You were talking about that you didn't even know you had to reach out to Joe with Aptly, shout out to Joe, and say, hey, where was I last year? What volume? Because you just seem to have this mentality of next deal up. Can you talk a little bit about that, where that came from and that mindset?
I'm so focused on helping people create life-changing by owning a house that I'm always like, okay, we got to close this deal. We got to get to the next deal. I never really think about the paychecks. I think when you start focusing on that, I've done deals for negative money instead of making money because it's what it took to get that person into a house. Changes their generational wealth, changes their families, their kids' statistics, if you look at the actual statistics. So I just don't focus on how many deals I've done or this. So it's just important to me to help change people's lives.
That's amazing.
So there's just, what I hear is there's just a high level of belief in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm just curious, do you set goals? Do you set volume goals, or do you set goals at all? Or do you set people goals? Or how do you approach that and not focus on the numbers, but focus on the people and kind of how you lay out your year and what has to happen?
So I think in sales, it's so customary to set like, okay, I'm going to do better this year or whatever. But I talked recently actually with my business coach that I don't want to necessarily do more numbers. I almost want to be like the Hermes bag of service, right? Like people go enter a lottery to go buy a $25,000 bag. And I don't care about the sales price, but I want to provide that level of service to people. That's huge. Like I want them to come, not because of pricing. Like anybody who calls me to rate shop, I say, I'm so sorry, but that's just not how my business works. I'm here to provide you service. And unfortunately, service costs money sometimes. And I'm going to give you the very best. And so I try to focus on that. So I don't necessarily set number goals anymore. It actually, COVID, when I got my first assistant, I was drowning in business. I couldn't keep up. I was working 18, 20 hours a day, and I don't want to do that because your quality of life isn't there. But thankfully, I was able to hire an assistant that helps with documents and so forth, kind of puts my life at ease, does all my social media because it's not where I strive.
Really? Your social media is awesome.
Yeah, I was going
Brittany
to say
is
the same
amazing.
thing.
Shout out.
Yeah, Brittany, you're
Because
doing a hell of a job.
Brittany makes sure I take pictures, get up from my desk, make video. She does the things, takes my crazy ideas sometimes and turns them into reality.
That's cool.
So she does a really good job with that. She's trained me well to make sure I take short little videos and then she puts them together because that is not my forte. So
That's cool.
that is her main thing, and she would love to do that all the time for me. But paperwork.
Yeah.
I learned why bottles of wine have the specific size that they
see?
have.
Fun fact Friday.
There you go. That was
Stay
great.
tuned.
Why is that?
You did a special Valentine's Day event, right?
I did. So I did a Galentine's for some close friends, and every event I have, we give back. So people paid, and they came and got a wine tasting, and then we painted wine glasses with a professional painter, and then we were able to give back to a local woman a need.
Yeah.
So all the proceeds went to that need. And so wine, just because it has the metal cap opener, does not mean that it's cheap wine, because it's a misconception. It's just that during World War II, Germany decided to put that because it was easier to get the wine open when they got to the front lines. So
Wow.
Yeah,
That is a
learn
little
that.
fun fact.
Fun fact.
fun fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I love that because so much of, the grind, I guess, if you will, is trying to outdo where you are. And I think it's innate in just competitiveness, but also remembering why you're doing it. And it's really, really cool. And I hear that from you, just a genuine, authentic, real approach to you're changing people's lives every time you get something approved.
Yeah. And honestly, when I bought my first house, is kind of how I got into this. I had called a pretty big lender name out there, and they had told me at 24 years old that I was going to need $30,000 to buy a $189,000 house, and that seemed so unachievable. Like, how am I going to get $30,000 at 24 years old? Just out of college, raising 2 kids. And so I called a mortgage broker that was referred to me by a friend, and I ended up walking into the house, literally sold my car, took a picture of cash in the parking lot because cash is a bad 4-letter word, people, and took a picture of the cash at the DMV so that I could buy my first house by selling my car. And we became a 1-car family for 5 years to buy that first house. So no excuses to buy a house. So
Love that.
yeah,
That's crazy.
it was crazy.
Man, I was a 1-car house for a while.
Yeah,
I was
was it a
Ubering
year?
to work.
It's rough.
Yeah, I did. We were building the business, and it was just times were tough, and it just made more sense for me at the time. This is before Uber prices went up.
Yeah.
But there was a minute there where Uber was actually really, really inexpensive, and I would Uber to work almost every day, and it was a legit thing. And I'd sit in the back and I'd work, and I'd have the same routine drivers, and then they raised their rates. I had to make a decision, but it was nice there for a minute. So it was a necessity, but it was also the utility of it. So
I think what you just said, though, because I actually have a couple friends of mine that are in the build phase, and they went 1-car, and we worked together. And somebody could argue whether it makes sense or not, or whatever it may be, but you just said something, whatever it takes, right? There's a level of commitment to a thing to where when people make goals, right? We talk about goals. It's like, okay, here's what I say I want. And then when you look at it, there's not an alignment of what habits or what they're sacrificing to get the thing they want.
Yeah.
And it seems like, in getting a little bit of knowing your story, and maybe you can speak to this, you said, no, I want to buy a house for my family, and I'm willing to be a 1-car house. But it seems like you've done that kind of throughout your career, and maybe that's led to some of the success that you've had because you're willing to kind of pay that price of what's required. Yeah. I'd love you to speak to that.
Yeah, I think that adversity turns into opportunity. And so when you're in adverse positions, like, you can choose to be a victim or turn it into opportunity. So when I first came to Florida when I was 18, I had $150 and I bought a bike and rode my bike every day to 2 jobs up and down Kirkman and Conroy for a year until we could buy that car that bought our first house. So if you think about, like, I even have a little, like, bike knickknack at my house to remind us where we came from with
Wow.
that, because it was just me and my husband at
That's
the time.
so cool.
And so even when people call me, I always say, I'll never tell you no. I'm going to tell you how we're going to get there. You're going to choose whether you tell yourself no or not. It might take 5 years. We might have to go through credit repair. We might have to save some money. We might have to eat macaroni and cheese and hot dogs, like the off-brand kind, for a long time.
Yeah,
like
we're not
no
talking
craft,
about organic.
okay?
Yeah.
No, I mean, we're going like maybe to like dollar store to buy things, And so you just have to make that sacrifice to get there. And so I tell everybody, I'll never tell you no. You're just telling yourself no. Let's see how we can get there. I'll help you get there. And it might be a little bit out of my reach, so we might have to get some professional help, but we'll get there if you commit to it. So 5 years doesn't seem so long when you can buy a house in it.
No.
So
You talk about building a lasting pipeline,
Yeah.
right? It's counterintuitive to say, well, I can't close this deal now because this person's too far. But I could spend a little bit of time on the front end to kind of coach them up, connect them with the right resources that it's not now, but now it's in the future, right? And that must help in you doing a thing for 9 years, and all of a sudden 2 years is a blink of an eye. And I remember when we first got in the insurance business, I used to think 1 year was a long time. And you're like, boom, the renewal's here. So it probably led to a pretty healthy pipeline of future buyers too.
And if you have a goal in mind with that, I mean, you'll stop drinking the coffees that cost $10. Like, you'll stop doing those things, and you'll really, okay, this is worth the sacrifice, because a lot of things are hard, but which hard do you choose, right? So we have to get there and work through the hard and meet the goal.
Right.
And I've had people, and those are the most satisfying. I don't care if it's a $50,000 purchase or $1 million. It's the most satisfying to sit at that table and watch somebody get the keys to their own house. It's the security. It's rent has risen 15% in Florida just in the last year and a half. Wow. That's huge. Families can't afford that. And
Just in the last year and a half.
15%, 7.5% in the first year, and then even higher this last year. So it was crazy.
Wow.
Talk about a crusade, man. What a noble cause to be able to give that to somebody.
Yeah. And it changes their family's life and generational wealth. And just reminding people, your starter home can build into a bigger home. I didn't start in the house I'm in now. Started in like $189,000 house in Bradenton, which I wish I still owned. Hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't buy anything in Bradenton for $189,000.
So you went from one bike
Yeah.
to 2 cars to 1 cars, and obviously you mentioned a little about your family life, and one thing you mentioned too, I want you to speak to, because we talked about navigating COVID, but we talked about commuting, and talking about where you live, but you go to the office every day, and you said anybody that works with you is required to go to the office every day.
Every day.
And what did you find that led you to that belief, and why does that work for you?
So when I started in mortgage, it was out of desperation at first, because we literally were living paycheck to paycheck. I was working from home for my best friend's parents, which was amazing because it allowed me to stay home for the first 2 years with my daughter. But we just literally, I have a college degree, and we couldn't get anywhere. It just felt like drowning desperation. And so I'd called the mortgage broker that helped me twice before, because we'd moved to Pensacola for my husband's job, which whole different part of Florida. And so she told me that, like, how much money she made and how I could do this. And then I hung up, and my husband was like, that was a commission job, right? And I'm like, no, I want somebody to pay me, right? And so I tell everybody in this business that want to come learn, because everybody can see the reward at the end, but they don't see the struggle and the hours that we put in to build it. And so everybody that's come to learn from me, I'll teach anybody. I'll teach anybody the secret sauce. You can sit with me 24 hours a day. I will teach you everything you need to know to do this, but you have to put in the work too. Like, you need to be there the times that I'm there. You need to go home the times I go home. Like, there's no part-time in this business, because I cried my first year every single day. And thankfully my husband was in sales, so he was like, keep going. We lived with his mom for 18 months with 2 kids in one room. And until we sold our house, Pensacola, because we couldn't afford 2 livelihoods here. And I went back actually to my best friend's parents, and I'm like, could you please hire me back? And she said, nope. She's like, she was in sales as well. And she said, keep going. If you don't close a deal in 6 months, I'll hire you back.
Wow, good for her.
And so I tell her now, thank you for not hiring me back, because in that time I was like, I'm sobbing. And of course she wants to hire me back, because for her selfish needs, I already knew how to do the job. She didn't have to train anybody, but she knew if I could just push through, and most people quit before the push through. Like
it's such a theme.
Yeah.
I met with somebody this morning who's a super high achiever. I have a lot of respect for her. And she drove up from Miami just to have coffee because we've been kind of passing each other on our different travels. And she was telling me her story. And it was, it's like very similar. And it amazes me. There's just this different perspective when you go through these challenges. Yeah. And I just hear it in the voice of, as anybody who's done something at the level in which you've done it, you just hear it, and it's just so genuine. I don't know if it's a perspective shift. I don't know if it's because that adversity makes you who you are. I don't know if it's that you just live by so much gratitude because you know what it's like to be on the other side. Maybe it's all the above, but it's just, man, you talk about patterns of achievement and patterns of creating more and patterns of, being impactful to people in your life. And that is such a story of genuine pattern with the people that do that, and it doesn't surprise me that you have that story. I never knew that when we sat down. I haven't heard that story. Yeah. I mean, and it just moves me because, number one, I relate to it, but number two, it's just such an aha moment for me. It's just like, of course she does. Of course she has one of these stories. She wouldn't be doing what she is doing right now if she hadn't been on the other side of that. Because it's like, you don't know what it's like unless you've done that, and you also don't know what it is if you haven't given up anything. Yeah, which is really cool to hear that from you.
And making that sacrifice, like I drive 35-ish minutes to work every day. I'm full believer, as I said, of working in the office. And listen, there's a few statistics in everywhere that will prove me wrong. I know a couple successful people that work from home, but in the most part, you can't work from home. There's too many distractions. You're not giving it your all. I love to be pushed and learn by people in the office. I am a thorough believer you can't close the amount of loans that I close if you're not in the office. Mm-hmm. I allow occasionally my staff to work from home. My processor does work from home, but he treats it like an office. He shuts the door. Dogs aren't allowed in, nothing. Like, that's it. But my assistant, she's in every day. Yeah. I think that learning from the people around you, listening to what they have to say, them listening to you so that they can step in if you have a problem is huge. Like, I learned everything I know in the mortgage business by sitting in there. The person who mentored me, I would literally show up at her house at 6 a.m. with coffee. We would work all day. I'd put my kids to bed. I'd be back. If she was working at 1 a.m., I was working at 1 a.m. It didn't matter because I wanted to be independent as soon as humanly possible. Yeah. And I learned from her. She went into the office, so I went into the office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's I forget the title of the book, but Mark Cuban wrote a book. It's How to Win in the Game of Business, I think is what it's called. And he talks about, like, he just doesn't believe in closed offices. Yeah. He believes in open offices. And it's funny, I've never had a closed office in my entire career since Urban Young. I don't think you have either. It's always been in a bullpen when you're hearing other people. Because either you need to hear other people or they need to hear you. It's like if you take your most experienced person and shut them off, you're missing all the juice. And if you take somebody and they're not in with somebody, they don't get to hear that stuff. So tell me about that as far as your progression. Did you pull a lot of that early on in your career from other people?
So I was kind of the only producer at the last company I was with for a time. And so it was different. I now am at an office that culture is huge.
Is awesome.
Is amazing.
Yeah,
honestly.
Shout out to Aptly. That's awesome.
It was so hard. Yeah. It was so hard in my business to move. And I also, as much as I like pushing forward, I also hate change. I'm like, why would you want to change? I don't understand. Because comfortable feels good, right? Like, stay on your same path. But if you don't get out of that comfort zone, you don't move forward. But moving was the best thing ever. Like, just culture, everything. And they have an open office space. Yeah. A little adjustment because me and my assistant both talk pretty loud, and I'm on the phone all day. Poor thing. Feel bad for her. But only occasionally. But it's amazing because we learn. I can just shout out. She knows that I'm just a quick, like, let's go. Yeah. And she can handle the things that I need her to do. The office is just inviting. It's energetic. Shout out to Nick and Joe, man. They've created a really cool environment over there. It's just as far as great
it's
branding.
Bright, it's fun, it's brand, it's got youth, to hear you say the culture, I love that. These guys are amazing. Well, so you made this transition, has that transition helped you become better, and why would that be? And then also, how long did it, that was 7 years into your career? 6 years?
8 years.
8 years into your career.
8 years, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a big move.
Big move.
And, is it fair to say that you're doing better than you ever have in this market over there?
Yeah, I mean, I've always stayed pretty consistent when it comes to numbers, if you put it like that. But whenever it comes to the culture, it's so huge. It has allowed my assistant to flourish, which is amazing because she does all the social media. If you scroll back through my social media, you'll see the difference in the last year. It's huge. It's allowed her to learn. They promote her to learn and encourage her. She feels more comfortable. Like our previous company, she wouldn't even talk to the people. Like she was in her office hiding.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that.
Wow.
Because I'm like in my own little bubble, just pumping it out
Grinding.
like we're doing our things.
Right.
But that has been huge. And then I brought on a new processor that actually used to be one of my account executives at a previous lender. And I called him and I was like, I can teach you the rest. Do you want to? I knew his culture would be there.
Yeah.
Kyle's amazing and he just handles me and tolerates me very well. So it's great. And so it's just the culture is huge.
That's
so
cool.
I consider that a much bigger benefit than closing more deals or anything like that. It's big and it's extraordinary. So
Fulfilling, happiness,
yeah.
you know, excitement to come into work every day. Yeah, especially when you're grinding so hard. It's like, hey, man, this has got to be worth it. It's got to be fun. I got to enjoy this.
they always laugh at me because I'm like, oh, my bosses. They're like, we're not your bosses. You know?
Yeah, that is such a curse word for like our generation.
Yeah, they're like, we're not your bosses, you know, and they genuinely, because I told Nick and Joe, I called every realtor that they know. I went 7 years through their social media to make sure that they were who they said they were.
Really?
Because this was a big move for me.
Yeah.
Stalker.
I did. I told them out front. I said, I checked everything. Like I PI investigated you. I called every realtor you knew.
That's so cool.
Every realtor you knew and said, hey, are they really these people or are they selling me a game? Because it's easy to sell somebody that closes 15 to 18 deals a month on average.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to act one way, but
Right.
they genuinely are those human beings.
That's
And by the way,
What a
it's
cool-
it's so easy to talk about culture, right? Like in an interview, which is such a good point, right? Because that's just become such a buzzword that if you're interviewing with a bunch of places, they're probably going to tell you that they have an awesome culture.
Yeah.
But for you to find out, well, what specifically about that culture, you know, that kind of thing. One thing I wanted to go back to, the tipping point. That you're right there, you're crying every day. The first year in the business, things aren't good. Financially, I would like to say that things aren't going well, right? You don't know if you're going to make it. High level of cortisol and stress pumping through your veins, a high level of uncertainty, and you know enough, but you don't know that you're going to be okay on the other side of it. You mentioned people that we know and we've been through this. What would you speak to them and tell them? If you were going to look back at yourself, is it simply keep going and it's going to be okay? What would you speak to that person? Because I just would love to encourage that person if they're listening to this podcast. There's so many people in sales and marketing that is a common feeling that you're not weird if you have. But I would love, given what you've gone through, and I would guess that it's not you've experienced that one time. You've probably experienced that multiple times at different levels. So I'd love for you to speak to that person.
Yeah, I feel like it's a constant feeling. I feel like whether we focus on numbers and things like that, I feel like in sales, we always feel like that. Like, are they not going to like us? Are they not going to call us back? What is going to happen? And stop thinking about that, first of all, which I still tell myself constantly. You can't be grateful and worried at the same time. Like, science says it, even the Bible references it. Like, it literally says be grateful in the things, because you can't worry and be grateful at the same time. So start saying your gratitudes. Keep going. Like, just keep going, even when it feels really hard, because when it's hard, that's when your breakthrough is almost there. So you have to keep going no matter what. And I've trained a couple people, and unfortunately they haven't made it because they stopped right before the breakthrough. And then COVID, like I had one person I was training and COVID came, and if she just would have waited a few more weeks, she would have like blown up.
Right, because interest rates went, market went bananas. So she was like the person digging, and they were 3 feet from gold, and then they didn't even realize it. They walked away.
And don't react in fear. And that is something that I really had to teach myself, is not reacting in fear, because even when COVID came, no one knew that mortgages would be insane.
Yep.
Like, I closed 321 deals my best year. I don't ever want to do that
just
again.
you?
People, just me, by myself, my assistant halfway through.
Insane.
Like, she came in, brought me a coffee 3 years ago, the day after my birthday. And she had just gotten laid off from being an occupational therapist. And I said, do you want a job? And she laughed. And I said, no. Like, do you want a job? Like, today. Can you start today? I can teach you. I'm like, all you have to do is get documents. Because this is still when I worked for a little bit of an archaic company. I mean, I've got paper files all over my desk and I can't find anybody. And I stayed very focused on purchases, and that is what's led to my success now.
Oh, man.
Because I said, if they want to refi, they'll wait for my service because the rates aren't going anywhere. So that's the problem why so many people right now don't have that business, is they didn't stay focused on their bread and butter, because refis are a quick, fast, instant gratification, and it's not going anywhere.
Let's talk about that. That is an absolute gem of a dime for somebody, because I think that's relatable not only to the lending space.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And I'm sure if you're in the lending space, you go, I've heard of that before. I know that.
Yeah.
I either made that mistake or, maybe I took advantage of that. But I think that's, because I look at that and I go, that's the shiny object syndrome, right? I'm doing my thing. I'm on the path. I'm priming the pump.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm churning the butter. It's taking longer because it takes a while to build that network and build those referrals, and anything that's worth doing is hard.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the way it looks. But then all of a sudden a shiny object comes along that you can have a quick money grab.
Yeah.
Or, I think of our business, like there might be some product, some insurance product that comes out that's really competitive in a space that you don't necessarily niche. And you're like, oh, well, I have the best rates. I can just flood the market with this, and then all of a sudden that product isn't competitive as much anymore. And so you didn't keep your eye on the ball of what you were doing, and that priming of the pump was coming to the surface. You never saw the yield, and now it goes all the way back down to the bottom. So I feel like it's very applicable in a lot of industries where you get sidetracked with the flavor of the month. And so what did that experience look like? First of all, did it come really fast, really furious? What did the market do? What did your competitors do first? Then secondly, why did you stay so focused on purchasing when arguably most people pivoted, if that's a fair statement?
Yeah. There were a lot of like online lenders and stuff that they were making negative money in these margins. It was ridiculous. And so I refused to compete with that, because I offer a level of service that I'm not going to do your loan for $100. Like, that's
why were
ridiculous.
They doing that?
Well, they're all closed now.
Oh.
So they were trying to get market share, thinking that
it.
they were going to stay low, but means that they didn't really understand why rates do what they do, and what that looks like, and what inflation looks like because of it, and so forth. So it came flooding in, and I was drowning, and I'm a people pleaser at heart, just because past childhood and so forth. So just the people pleaser comes easy, and it's very hard for me to not take the deal, right? So I had to search inside. I got some major therapy at that time. Like, literally, that's when I was like, oh, hang on, I've got to fix this people pleaser real quick, or I can't do this business.
Interesting. Because you needed to say no, and you couldn't say no.
I couldn't say no. Wow. And I knew I needed to, and I knew there was now I'll tell a client, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm going to respectfully bow out. And I get the best response. I've told realtors, hey, I'm so sorry, I just don't think we're the best fit together. So sorry. Because I want to provide the service to the people that know that I provide a value in that service and long term. I want their kids, their grandmothers. I remember from 9 years ago, my clients' grandkids' names and their dogs' names. And they'll always say, do you remember? I said, yes, I remember you. But I knew in that moment that I had to say no to those, because I had worked so hard over years to build relationships with realtors. When I got into it, I called literally every title company in Orlando. And I said, hey, can you just call me if you have any deals that are canceling right before closing? Because unfortunately, not all loan officers are made the same. And so you'd get halfway, how many times do you hear it? And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, your loans declined 2 days before closing.
Oh, God.
And so I called every title company over and over and over, because there are 1 billion and one loan officers in the state of Florida. It's the highest licensure in any state. Florida is the number one because it's the easiest to get your license. And I said, well, I'll have to be different, because who's going to come to Ashley Bedford who they don't even know? And so I just called them, and finally a title company called me back. And I closed that deal in 10 days.
Wow.
And then I got known as oh, she can save a loan, call her. Because people just forget that title companies are the front line to that lender seeing it.
Wow, I never heard that before.
So you just went full on guerrilla type marketing. You found these lists of these title companies and said,
Google.
Yeah, it's very, it's not like you dug through the paper files. Yeah. So, but what was interesting, you said, I found a list. I created a narrative of a problem I can solve. Yeah. And that's my thing that I'm going to focus on. I was listening to a podcast with Brett this morning that he was on as a guest, and he was talking about how you might do a lot of different stuff in the beginning. Like you might take a lot of different types of loans, maybe even doing refis in your business, but then you're niching certain marketing at a high velocity for a certain type of prospect so you can get focused on purchase business or on stuff. So you basically said, hey, title companies, any closings that falls through, call me, I can help. Mm-hmm. Boom, 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 dials, maybe momentum, not getting it, boom, it hits. And all of a sudden that opened up a floodgates, it sounds like.
And then that realtor tells the next realtor, like, oh, call my girl Ashley. And then you get your name on the listing where, hey, we're not taking your offer unless you call my girl Ashley. Like, that's what works.
Because they had deals fall through. And so they could trust
their seller to be in that.
Yeah, they could trust that Ashley's going to give me a deal that's going to close, not fall through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because a lot of times you go online and, like, you could put in, you make $1 million, they'll give you a pre-approval right now. Well, did they ask for any of your documents? Like, anything? So how are you going to get to closing if that's not true?
Right.
But you have an offer on a house.
Right. So let's dissect that real quick, because I know you're getting at, but you have this marketing niche, which is there are deals that fall through all the time because they're not done right.
Yeah.
And somebody needs a lifeline, right? Mm-hmm. Someone falls out of the boat and they're going to grab onto the first life preserver they can see, and you wanted to be the life preserver. Yeah. So you're calling saying, hey, when things fall through, just let me know, I can fix this. Boom, you get an opportunity. All of a sudden you develop a relationship. All of a sudden you develop a reputation in that space. When was it that, because it's fair to say that those deals are tougher deals, right? There's a reason there's a reason that they got declined or didn't get approved or fell through. They're usually the tougher deals.
Yeah.
So when did the shift occur when you start to go, all right, I'm going after quantity because I'm early in the business and I'm marketing hard. Now I've got the quantity. Now I'm going to start getting more targeted on saying no to some things, and saying and start to focus in more on the quality instead of the quantity, because it sounds like there was a shift that occurred there.
Well, I still do those hard deals, which most originators that produce what I do are like, why are you doing that?
Okay.
Because that's the underdog I want to help. The people who get declined a loan or have that type of mortgage experience, it's so traumatic that they're 50% more likely to never attempt to buy a house again.
Really?
50%.
Wow.
Because imagine like being that person and they tell you can't. So now you are literally traumatized. Like you've told your kids, your family, everyone that you're buying a house. And now you've put your notice in at your apartment and now you have no place to live. And you're next to homeless. You've invested money into moving trucks, things like that. So they're less likely. So I do still do those deals, but where my quality steps in is the attitude.
Yeah.
Like I was going to go on a trip to Alaska and my team was going to take over most of it. I'm a little controlling. So, just
detailed
certain hours. Yeah. Certain hours I was going to step in because a lot of loan officers you'll call and then you'll get their team for the rest of the time. That's not the case with me. You get me the entire time from start to finish. I do introduce my team and they do help get things, but you need something, you're calling me all the time. And so I had a client that called and, it was a pretty big deal and not difficult, but the attitude was there. And I said, I'm not going to let my team deal with this attitude while I'm gone. And so I said, I'm so sorry. I just think that you might be a better fit someplace else. I'll send over all your documents to that person if you want to send me an email. Like, great.
I totally hear that in you, right? You're looking at the niche technically, but you're looking at the niche as I want buyers who appreciate and are willing to use my service, right? The minute I get rate shoppers with a little bit of an attitude, I'm gonna bow out respectfully. And what I hear from that is because from experience, my guess is that at the end of that rate shopping and attitude, they're not going to be somebody that really appreciates what you did. And so they're definitely not going to refer you more buyers.
Absolutely.
Or God forbid, they're going to refer more people like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the people that really appreciate what you did, although it be a little bit harder, they are going to refer more buyers. And that will be a story that transcends in the market. So that's what I hear, which is actually a little twist on the niche that I like. It's very unique.
Rachel Hollis said in her book, Girl Wash Your Face, that she built these things into her price. Like at first she was like, oh, well, I can't do that. Like, I'm not going to do that because they don't want me there. But then she realized that, you know what? I do add value. I want you there. And now she's like a millionaire because she was like, you know what? I do add value there. And I'm going to say no to these things. And I'm going to say yes to these things. And I'm going to build in my value and my price there. And not all of that is monetary.
Yeah, I love that.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So people that are, you work a lot and you work hard on these files and you put your blood, sweat, and tears in, and the real reward is the satisfaction that comes from somebody being excited at what you did. That's where it sounds like your happiness and fulfillment comes from. So if you get to the end and somebody doesn't have that, it's like, man, I put in all this work and I'm not really solving the problem that they really wanted in the beginning, you know? Yeah. Which is.
And I've done loans for free. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I've literally waived my whole commission because that's what it took to get in. Maybe we underappraised and we needed money. Like, that part doesn't matter to me. It's when you call me and there's an entitlement there to like, oh, well, you should do this for like.
I got a question on that
money.
though. If you have a realtor that you really like, right, that refers you a buyer that has a poor attitude, entitlement, how do the realtors take that call? Because anybody in referral source marketing knows that it's more about the relationship with the person referring than it is potentially about the buyer. So how do you balance that? How do you find the receptiveness of the realtor? Are they pretty receptive to know, yeah, you know what, that buyer is a challenge, I understand respectfully, and we'll get you on the next one? Or have you had relationships that maybe weren't as receptive and you're okay with it because it's a law of large numbers and
losing that potential referral source?
I feel as though I've been able to represent my value to most of my referral partners. So I just call them and I say, hey, listen, they're getting a great deal, to be honest with you. Let them go ahead and take it. If anything happens where it falls out, give me a call and I'll take it over and I'll handle that for you, because I'm not the only great loan officer out there. Sure. There's like 50 other, but I'm also my only competition. Like, they're not my competition. So I try to focus on that. Like, I had a loan officer that I know, and she was like, oh, I want to close 321 deals. I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, I promise you don't. Great. Like, yeah, just kidding, you don't. Because it's impossible. I'm like, but so stop focusing on that and just focus on all the help that we can provide.
You'll respectfully bow out without saying, hey, I'm not helping them, because it's just you're really internally, that's why you're not going to put the extra in. But more, it's just like, hey, look, they're getting a good deal. I can't add a bunch of help. This is going to be a rate shop situation. Respectfully, thank you so much for sending it over. Okay.
And if it's a real bad attitude, just because sometimes I've had that, I'll call and say, hey, listen, I just don't think we're going to be a best fit. This could be very turbulent because of it. And, I've worked really hard to build my reputation with you and as well as the other side. So I'm just going to step out of this one. I appreciate it. Anything happens, please let me know.
It's a clinic, because I hope that's such a good, you could do a whole topic on that, because I don't know about you, Taylor, but I've seen where the ego gets involved and somebody bows out of a deal and they don't do it respectfully and it comes off the wrong way, and now you burn a bridge, right? But then I've also seen, on the other hand, when they won't bow out of the deal because they're afraid that burns a bridge. Yeah. And what I hear from you is you can bow out of any deal as long as you do it respectfully and you do it tactfully and you do it the right way. And it doesn't mean you're not going to get the next deal that they have. Right? Yeah. And I think there's a misconception with referral-based selling that, man, if I don't take every single deal, they're not going to send me the next one.
Yeah.
And I think that's a misconception, as long as you're a top professional and you know your value. Yeah. And you've shown your value. If you're brand new, maybe they won't send you the next one because you don't have a reputation yet. But if you've done the right things over a long period of time, they're going to want to refer you business, not because they just like you, but because you're really good at your craft.
Yeah.
Right?
And I try to add value to them. Like, we'll have like social media recordings together, things like that. And I always say what's meant for me is meant for me and what's not, it's not. And so if they feel like because that one deal, like maybe we weren't the best.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's abundance mindset versus scarcity is what I hear too. I wanted to ask you too, because the 321 loans really by yourself, like
I'm like upregulated
exactly.
even thinking about it.
Speaking of cortisol, I wanted to talk to you about just effort, like flat out, right? I mean, everyone's got the same amount of time in a day, 24 hours, right? That hasn't changed in a while. And the excuses can flow in from sales professionals, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of those excuses are based in fear personally, right? But you had 2 kids, right? You had a husband who's working. You had all these challenges that you've referenced early on in this podcast. How do you get it all done? where do you find time? What would you say to somebody? Is it just flat out effort and put up or shut up? Or like, is there anything you do to approach your day, more hours, time management, anything you would say to somebody looking to find more time?
So hire your time. Decide the things that you can hire that you make more money an hour for. Like, I don't clean my house anymore, to be honest with you. And that's not anyone in my family's strong suit. So I pay some amazing women to come clean my house.
Yep.
Like, and then I show up once a week and my house is clean.
Beautiful.
Because
Hire your time.
Because the great Oprah Winfrey says that your house should rise up to you, your car should rise up to you, and your office should rise up to you. So keep all those spaces tight and clean, and you'll be good. Like if everything's a mess, you're a mess. Like your brain's a mess, everything. You can't stop thinking about those distractions. So like my dry cleaning, I was just telling Joe and Nick yesterday, they pick it up at my house and drop it off at my house because I don't have time to stop at the dry cleaner. My assistant returns my Amazon purchases because I don't have time to go to Whole Foods because then I'm distracted because their guacamole is so good, you know? And so then I'm putting all the things in my cart because my ADHD has gotten the best of me. And so just hire your time and figure out what's worth it. Like someone comes and cleans my car once a month. I'm not ashamed of it because I can make more money sitting at my desk than helping a client. Like I try to do you don't always have to do all the lunches and stuff. Thankfully, I have some amazing referral partners that aren't super high maintenance. I build relationships. Like I try, like if I see that something's happened to their family, I'm not a great cook. I had a pretty rough childhood. I don't know how to cook very well. My husband's an amazing chef.
There you
go. So I'll send them an Uber Eats gift card because don't ask people what they need. Just give them something. So like I've hired laundry services. They're always going to tell you, no, I'm okay. I'll let you know if I need something, but send the Uber Eats gift card, send an Instacart shopper with some stuff if you see that they're sick. I don't have time to go eat lunch with every realtor I know. I just can't do it, but I also value them and I appreciate their referrals to me because there's a billion other people that they could choose and they choose me.
That's so good.
So just, I stalk social media like crazy and see, you know, they had a baby born, they're sick, whatever can happen. And that's how I build those relationships. I can't go meet with coffee. Like you'd rather have me at my desk, working the file, getting it closed. I'm clear to close on average in 10 days. Like I want you and your client to feel so rest assured and easy that we're okay at the end and not think, oh my God, is something going to happen that's going to fall through? That's what I want.
So good.
Brett, I'll kick it over to you. I just can't help myself. You know, one thing I think about hiring your time, beautiful, it's basic, but those things that you reference have nothing to do with the mortgage business, right? Yeah. You're starting even more basic before I'm hiring my lesser valuable things that I do in my business. It's like, no, like the distraction of childcare, cleaning your house, dry cleaning, the basic stuff in life that are, if they're not taking your time physically, they are taking your time mentally because you're thinking to myself, oh, I got to get my dry clean. Oh my gosh, now I'm going to rush because I got to get my dry clean. And I think people underestimate the mental load. I've learned that from my wife, just as far as this mom stuff, this whole mental load thing. And I totally get it, right?
Yeah.
And the mental load sometimes devastates you more than actually what it takes to do the thing. Yeah. And if you're able to hire your time, you're able to get rid of a portion of that mental load and then continue to escalate up. And then I think also something you said that I can't help but speak on is the lunch and the coffees with the realtors. You know what? Like in practicality, those realtors are busy too, right? Yeah. They don't have time to have lunch with every partner that they have. And so there's a time for everything. And I think everyone should reflect on what they do well and where they kind of fit within that. Look, if you're a very gregarious person and you love taking people out to drinks, you may do that more than somebody that maybe doesn't know how to cook and has found out that I'm going to send an Uber Eats gift card and it's going to have the same impact.
And you can text it now.
Yeah, right.
Like,
you know what I mean?
It's
Really?
great. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
you
that's
just
cool.
go on there and you text
Like
it right
Apple
to them.
Pay where you shoot it over?
Yeah, and you just text it right to them. And I said, hey,
dope.
I just wanted to take some time off of your family, so you could go ahead and order.
Yeah, and then the
Uber Eats.
social media scrolling. Like some people are like, oh, I'm not on social media. It's so hard to do what we do and not be on social media.
To be on social
because
media.
you don't know what's going on in their life. You have to go have lunch with them for 2 hours to find out what's going on in their life. So if you're trying to save time, get social media for the basic fact that you can scroll their Instagram to find out what's going on with their kids, what's important to them. So a little bit of a rant, but I think that was very practical and useful for anybody in a production or referral-based business. So.
And how I work my social media is, you'll see, we've got Fun Fact Friday. I rarely talk about mortgages on my social media because mortgages are kind of boring at the core of things, you know? Like, no one wants to know about, like, liability coverage. Like, they just want to know that they're covered if the leak happens, right? Like,
so good.
And so I want to get people there so they know who I am, but they don't really care. Like, even when I do realtor events, for example, I talk about mortgages for 5 minutes. And then I've hired my therapist to come in. I pay her, and she talks about work-life balance and how there is no balance. It's priority in the moment, because if you try to achieve balance, you will fail every single time.
I love you.
Whatever is priority in that moment, you have to do.
Just talking my language.
Like, so you can't, like, right now, this is priority. I can't answer my phone, right?
Absolutely.
So I can't find the balance there. Like, I'm sure I'm going to have 20 missed phone calls when I walk out of here.
It drives me nuts when people say that the balance thing. I'm like, have you ever done anything great in your life? It's imbalanced all the time.
All the time. Like, but when I'm tucking my kids in at night, I'm not going to answer the phone. Like, that's my kids' time. I mean, we were talking about the number one wholesaler, UWM, Matt Ishbia. He does the same thing. He puts his phone on airplane mode for 1-2 hours at night, and that is his kids' time. And he is the number one in the U.S. Like, so something's got to be doing right?
Yeah, so good. Prioritization in the moment.
Yeah.
What are you doing in the moment, and what is most important? And can you shut off the other stuff while you're doing that moment?
And providing value for everybody you touch. So when I hire that therapist, not only does she get business from that, but also they're getting value from that to learn these type of things.
So cool.
So just bring other people in, because no one wants to hear about.
It's so funny. We'll do trainings with some of the newer staff, and I think newer in the business. By the way, I automate my life. My wife was a hairstylist. She's now retired, but she would always give me a hard time because I wouldn't come get my haircut. And I was just say that I can't come get my haircut. It's a waste of my time. I'm sorry. So now I have somebody that comes to the house. They do all my haircuts. I have somebody that comes to the house. They do all the for a car wash. And I'm just a big believer that
workouts are at your house.
Workouts at the house. It is a. I've never heard somebody say hire your time. I've heard automate your life, but I love that, because that is a sometimes people don't want to let go of the money, and they don't want to spend the extra, and it's like, do 300 and something loans and you won't say that anymore. You will gladly pay whatever you got to pay to make sure you can get some sort of time back. Yeah.
I mean, I shop online. Thank you, 2024. I love that there's convenience in our lives. Yeah. People will call it bougie all the time, but I'm like, no, I'm making more money because I'm doing this. 100%. I literally haven't, I go get a blowout on my hair once a week, and that's how my hair gets washed. Because then I don't have to do anything with it all week. It's a time saver. I learned that from another loan officer, and my hairstylist knows. She pulls up a little hair tray for me, and my computer goes there while she's blowing my hair. I'm working.
Hair looks great.
So it's just great. And so just hiring those things. Yeah. Life altering, because I'd rather spend time with my kids.
So good. Well, you mentioned the cost of it because people don't want to part money. It's an investment, right? And by the way, it's kind of like investment. If you can't do it right now, well, when you get that next commission check, then do it. At least make a commitment to your future self that if you're maxed out and you're at your threshold of expenses and you can actually justify that there's nothing else in your life that you can cut out, which is very rare, but there are those times. Then when you get that next bump that is over and above that threshold, make the commitment that you're going to hire the cleaning service. Make the commitment that you're going to do something to get back your time. Yeah, you have to. I think that's maybe not, but I think it's there's some generational friction there. Yeah. Because the way we grow up was, if you can do it yourself, you should do it yourself. Yeah. And that is the complete contradiction to getting to the next level for this point in my life, at least my belief. It's like the way to get to the next level is to gain more capacity. And the way that you gain more capacity is using leverage, and money is leverage, right? That's a way that you can pull a lever to buy back some of your time. So I think that shift, I have a neighbor of mine who renovated his whole house, and he's a high level executive. And he said he almost, he talks about just the challenges that came with that and the impact it had on his family and all this stuff. And he was like, well, I could do everything myself. And he says, man, if I had gone back, just because I can do it on myself doesn't mean I should have. Yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Exactly. And everything has a cost. It just depends on how you want to look at it. And yes, it's an investment, but also not spending that money has a cost to it too. And which one is the greater of the costs?
Yeah. Like if we pick up our dry cleaning, we have to leave the office by 4:30 to get there by 5 before they close too.
Right. And by the way, the reason that people don't do that, I believe, is because they feel a guilt.
Yeah.
They feel a guilt that, like, who am I to hire a cleaning service? Who am I
to
have somebody
quote
pick
unquote bougie, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that at the core of that, you mentioned therapy. Look, I've been to therapy. I'm a believer in it.
Yeah.
There are certain things that embedded within us as we grew up that you have to address to be able to actually break those behavioral patterns to be able to go to the next level. Because if you want to stay where you are, you don't have to do any of this, right?
Yeah.
But this conversation is for the people that say, hey, I'm bumping up against a thing and I want to get here. And you may have to do something different, and you may have to get past some of that guilt to say, no, it's okay. And I still fight that. You mentioned that happens. I think there's different levels of it. Yeah. It might be dry cleaning and mowing your lawn at first. Yeah. And then it might be answering your phone for this type of thing rather than directing it to a team member that can help that is not me. Yeah. And I'm dealing with that right now in my own season. I'm getting comfortable being uncomfortable there. So again, very practical and helpful.
Yeah.
One of the nuggets you mentioned that I wanted to hit on because I think it's profound. I think it's so impactful, especially for new professionals. You talked about marketing that you spend 5 minutes on loans. And we tell the guys and gals over here all the time that are new with insurance, it's like, hey, look, they want you to be the expert. They don't need you to teach them to be the expert, right? They want to know that you're competent. They don't need you to give them an education course on how this goes. They just need to feel comfortable that you know what you're doing. And it's like, what problem are you solving? Are you solving the problem of making them a loan originator? Or are you solving the problem of putting them at ease and giving them peace of mind that they're not going to have to worry about this and that they're in good hands? And I think that shift from what I hear from you is spending more of your time on making sure people know that you're competent and can help them, and then create that connection and that value, I think is so genius in marketing. Because it's like when I go to a top specialist, let's say it's a doctor, and it's a world-renowned doctor, and I go in, they don't sit there for 30 minutes and tell me why they're a world-renowned doctor. Why would they need to do that? It's assumed, right? Yeah. They're focused on me. They're asking me questions. They're probing. They're interested. They're trying to get to the root of whatever I need. They're not doing a PowerPoint on why I made the decision to go to them. And I think so many people early in their career, because they don't have that confidence build, they spend only 5 minutes on the connection part, and the rest of their time is why they should be the person that they use for everything. And I think it's such a mistake because it de-edifies you as a professional, and it's as if you're giving way too much on somebody, and they're going, "Why are you? I don't need to know all this stuff." Yeah. In insurance, we get lost in that all the time. Yeah. It's like I hear somebody spend 20 minutes on an endorsement on how the policy reads and all this stuff, and that person's, they just got off the phone with 3 different vendors throughout the home buying process, and they're pretending to be interested in what you're saying, and you are just giving them way too much information. You're overwhelming them with stuff that they don't need to know, instead of putting them at ease that you know what you're talking about and you're the professional and you're going to do what's best for them.
It's the whole purpose. I just had this conversation. We do a little Appley Speaks at Appley, and it's like a Toastmasters, and I'm really good at being put on the spot. Terrifying. But we were talking about, I don't talk about rates, which is completely different than most loan officers. It is. And I will steer anybody away from rates because rates are subjective. Like Monday was horrible. Today we've gained it all back. Do you want me to talk about the doom and gloom that you're reading everywhere? Because no news and clickbait sells. So they want you to click and see the bad news. Right. Doom and gloom sells. Right. Misery loves company, like all the things. So I never talk about rates. I talk about affordability. I rarely present a fee sheet prior to you being under contract because it's like giving a kid a bag of candy and tell them to only eat one piece. They cannot do it. And so it is like, that's like me reading through the insurance policy. I'm like, I don't care. I always tell Gian, I know enough to be dangerous, but could you please call them and tell them? All I care is that the policy is not canceled after closing. If there's any issues, I don't want to know about them because guess what? I referred you.
Absolutely.
So I need to make sure that your customer service afterwards, I never want to hear it. The client should never be reaching out to me and saying, oh my gosh, that person you referred me to, my policy's canceled. I got a cancellation in the mail. Like you should prep them for all the invoices that come after that fake cancellation that comes because the check's in the mail.
Right.
All of the things. So I talk about affordability and your total cash out of pocket because rates could be 7 today and 5 tomorrow. It's like, I don't want to talk about rates.
It's so good.
And bye. Like I offer
it
more
reminds
than
me
rates.
of like a wealth planner or a financial advisor. It's like if you spent all your time talking about the market and
returns.
Our equity's up, our equity's down, what's going to happen, what's the economy doing. It's like, no, we have a 20-year time frame, 30-year time frame. Let's talk about strategy. Let's talk about affordability. Let's talk about what the other option is. If you don't want to put your money in equities, okay, here's the other option, and here's the cost of that. I hear if you don't want to buy, here's what the cost of rent is. So which one's going to be the best option for you, instead of being focused on, well, are equities up today or equities down today? What's the election doing? Is it a bull market? Is it a bear market? It's like all that stuff is just confusing, and it changes every single day.
Every day based on who's talking on the news, like every day.
Right.
Unimportant people that were self-fulfilling prophecies of that. Like that's what it is. Yeah. I did a live yesterday as I was watching a gentleman on MBS Highway. And that's what we watch for mortgages, like in market updates and the real information that you want to know, because I am educated on those things and I will explain them to the client. But he said if rates drop 1%, that puts 5 million people back into the market. Well, do you know what happens when that happens? Yep. You're paying 50, 100, 75,000 over, because you remember when rates were 2%, you couldn't get into a house. Do you know how long it takes you to pay $100,000 of interest?
No.
A long time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so get into the house, refinance later if you can afford it right now, because I never want to put anybody in a unaffordable place. Like I don't ever want anybody to lose their security. Yep. But if you can afford it, let's get in the house when you're not paying $50,000, $100,000 of cash over. You can get seller concessions now, so forth. So just reassuring your clients that way, even realtor partners and so forth, is huge.
Such good strategy.
Shout out to Brittany on the social, because I saw that when I was stalking you this morning. I saw that 5 minutes.
She was really mad at me because I recorded that myself. And she was like, oh my God, the ceiling is in your picture. I was like, listen, you weren't here and you left me to my own devices. And she was like, oh, fine.
Well, I wanted to end because I want people to be able to find you, which would be great. But I have one more question, if I can be selfish to you. We've talked about a lot today. It's just such great nuggets. Number one, just your story, who you are, what you've been through, where you are, how you approach your day, your mindset. It's just incredible. What is one thing that you do today that you wish you would have done earlier? So your earlier self, maybe you had started to have some traction, and it could be something you've mentioned today, but something that you do today that you wish you could go back when it wasn't self-evident, but if you knew you were going to make it, if you knew everything was going to be okay, you would have started that earlier to maybe give yourself more quality of life.
I would have said no to a lot more people and realtors and clients. Yeah. Because I took a lot of like abuse, quote unquote, from them. And which put more stress, and I could have closed 3 more deals than that. And so I would have said no a lot earlier. And I tell everybody in my office that. They'll tell you, like, I would have said no before. Now, there are some clients that I'm like, if they're great, like, I'll do whatever it takes, you know? Yeah. Whatever it takes to get you in the house, we're going to get there. But I would have said no a lot earlier. And it's not about the money. It's not about the loan amount. Because, like I said, I'll do $50,000. I don't care. Yeah. Sometimes that's easier than a $2 million deal, to be honest, because there's more investors for it than... So, but just saying no beforehand.
That's so good.
Don't take yourself for granted in it. So
I hope every producer in our company listens to this podcast, because there's so much to gain, and it's so relatable to what you were saying. And I couldn't agree more on the abuse you take. Yeah. It's not about the hard deal. You're right. Sometimes the harder deal is easier because there's not other people working on it. Yeah. It's the sometimes the toll that it takes on you for putting up with a certain, a poor expectation of what it should be when it's not based in reality, and that cycle can kind of get you way out of whack. And really, really good stuff. I can't wait to listen to this back and take a full page of notes. Incredible.
So Ashley, how do people find you?
Ashley the Mortgage Magician on Instagram. That's cool. And ashley.apleyhl.com has all my contact information.
That's amazing. Well, I want to thank you for being here today. For all the listeners at home, if you have somebody that's maybe gaining traction, if you have somebody that's in that phase when they don't know if it's going to be okay, they're in their first sales gig, and share the podcast with them. This has been an amazing time with you. You have such wisdom, such grace, such genuineness. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for making it happen.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Well, cool. Well, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, we sure would love that you would subscribe to the podcast. We've got stuff dropping every 2 weeks now and incredible guests. So for those of you that don't want the ordinary, remember life is meant to be extraordinary. Bye-bye for now.